David and I had been married for about 5 years when our daughter, Amy, was born. From the very beginning, I sensed a troubling disconnect between David and our unborn child. When I told him I was pregnant, his response was flat and indifferent. "Oh, is that so?" This lack of enthusiasm stung, and I felt compelled to confront him. "Why aren't you happy?" I shouted, leading to a heated argument. Despite the tension, I tried to rationalize his behavior. I remember the time when my sister Sarah had her daughter Hannah. David, who was still my boyfriend at the time, was visibly moved when he held Hannah for the first time. He cried, exclaiming how small babies were and gently stroking Hannah's cheek. His love and tenderness in that moment were evident. So, it baffled me why he couldn't show similar affection for Amy, even before she was born. When we learned that Amy was a girl, David's response was simply, "Oh." I asked him if he would attend the birth, and his immediate reply was, no. It was as if he was afraid of becoming a father. I tried to accept his attitude, hoping that things would change once Amy arrived. When she was born, I was overjoyed. She was beautiful, and the moment she grasped my finger with her tiny hand, my heart melted. Yet, even then, David's disinterest was palpable. When my sister visited with Hannah, who was 2 years older than Amy, David's demeanor shifted dramatically. He only seemed interested in Hannah, showing affection and care towards her while ignoring Amy. I often found myself questioning, why won't David hold Amy? Why does he seem irritated when she approaches him? When I confronted him, he would dismiss my concerns, insisting he was too busy with work. His ambition to rise in his career seemed to overshadow everything else, including our family. As time went on, I felt increasingly isolated. Raising Amy felt like a solo endeavor, and even though I made friends with other mothers, I still carried the burden of David's emotional absence. One day, a straightforward mom friend bluntly suggested I consider divorce. Raising a child should be a joint effort between husband and wife, she said, her words ringing true. I pondered her advice, wrestling with the fear of raising Amy alone and the potential consequences of separating her from her father, no matter how neglectful he was. That night, after finally deciding to discuss divorce with David, he unexpectedly approached me with a shocking request. He wanted to donate Amy's heart to our niece Hannah, who was suffering from a severe heart condition and wouldn't live much longer without a transplant. His urgency alarmed me. "We need to get Amy's heart to Hannah as soon as possible," he insisted, his agitation palpable. I was taken aback and couldn't comprehend the gravity of the situation. "What are you talking about?" I protested, my voice rising in disbelief. It was then that David revealed that he considered Hannah his child. I was dumbfounded and felt a wave of sickness wash over me. I couldn't understand how he could make such a request, especially since it seemed he had a long-standing crush on Sarah, Hannah's mother. David explained his complicated feelings. He had once proposed to Sarah but lost her to Kyle, her current husband, who was a civil servant with a more stable future. David, on the other hand, had always been driven by ambition, hoping to rise through the ranks and gain financial stability. It seemed he believed that saving Hannah's life would somehow redeem him in Sarah's eyes, as he had been secretly meeting with her, feeding into his obsession. As I absorbed this information, I felt like my entire world was crumbling. David's desperation to save Hannah, coupled with his indifference towards our daughter, shattered my understanding of our family dynamics. The emotional turmoil left me feeling trapped between the love I had for Amy and the chaotic web of David's unresolved feelings for my sister. A woman finds herself in a complex and emotionally charged situation involving her husband David, his obsession with another woman named Sarah, and the safety of her daughter Amy. David has been emotionally distant and unfaithful, fixated on Sarah, who is already raising a child with another man named Kyle. Sarah had promised David that if he got promoted and started earning more, she would leave Kyle and come live with David and her child Hannah. The woman, David's wife, is deeply hurt by the realization that David's primary reason for marrying her was not love, but but rather to stay close to Sarah and have more opportunities to see Hannah. This revelation shattered her, as she had loved David, but he had never truly reciprocated her feelings, leaving her feeling miserable and frustrated. As tensions escalated, David began questioning the paternity of Amy, their child, cruelly suggesting that Amy must be the child of some unknown man because she didn't resemble him. His attitude became more hostile, prioritizing Hannah's well-being over Amy's, even suggesting that Amy's heart should be given to Hannah, which deeply horrified the woman. In this moment, she realized that something inside her had snapped. She wasn't sure whether it was her love for David or her patience, but she saw him as a monster, someone she could no longer trust. Despite David's harsh accusations, she stood her ground, firmly stating that she had never cheated and that Amy was definitely their child. However, she pointed out that while Amy might not physically resemble David, she was nothing like him in character. Amy was kind, unlike David, who had become cold and unreasonable. Seeing his anger, the woman no longer felt afraid. Instead, as a mother, she became determined to protect her daughter at all costs. Fearing for Amy's safety, the woman decided it was too dangerous to stay in the house with David. While he was distracted working on a project report for his promotion, the same promotion Sarah had pushed him towards, she quietly woke Amy, gathered only the essentials, and left the house. Amy, still half asleep, was confused but obedient, and when the woman explained they were leaving to go to her grandparents' house, Amy nodded in understanding, though she was sad about leaving her kindergarten friends behind. The woman and Amy left the house quietly and ran to the train station. She considered taking the car but realized it would be troublesome if David later demanded it back. They boarded a train and headed toward her parents' home. Amy, exhausted, fell asleep on the way. By the time they arrived, it was late, close to the last train of the night. Despite numerous calls and messages from David, the woman ignored them, focusing only on getting Amy to safety. When they arrived at her parents' house, her parents were still awake and were surprised by the sudden visit. Before explaining the situation, the woman asked if she could put Amy to bed, and after settling her daughter, she returned to the living room to tell her parents everything. She revealed her decision to leave David, explaining the cruelty she had endured and the dangerous situation Amy was in. Her parents were shocked and distressed to hear about David's obsession with Sarah and his neglect of Amy. The next morning, the woman, unable to sleep, faced a new day with determination. Amy, still too young to fully understand the situation, was overjoyed to be with her grandparents. Watching her parents interact with Amy, the woman recalled advice from a friend who had told her to divorce David as soon as possible. The thought that David might have been planning to harm Amy without consulting her sent chills down her spine. Resolute in her decision, she texted David, informing him that she would be seeking a divorce through lawyers and that he was never to see Amy again. Soon after, she received a phone call from David's parents, who were shocked by the news of the divorce. David had told them that the separation was due to an affair and that Amy wasn't his biological child. The woman, realizing David was trying to manipulate the situation, told his parents the truth about everything, including David's obsession with Sarah and the dangers Amy had faced. She invited them to her parents' house to discuss the matter further, since her parents had also arranged for Sarah and Kyle to come over that evening. When the evening came, the woman, her father, Sarah, Kyle, and David's parents gathered in the living room to discuss the complicated situation. Meanwhile, the woman's mother looked after Amy upstairs, keeping her safe from the turmoil that was unfolding below. Hannah appeared uneasy, Sarah looked uncomfortable, and Kyle wore an angry expression. Earlier, I had briefed Kyle over the phone about the previous day's events and David's plans. Kyle struggled to conceal his frustration towards Sarah. "So, Hannah isn't my daughter after all?" Kyle asked sharply. Sarah, who had been biting her lip, burst into tears under Kyle's probing questions. "Yes," she admitted reluctantly amid sobs. Sarah's emotional outburst was intense as she yelled, "How could you not understand? I wanted to help Hannah. As a mother, it's natural." Kyle, visibly upset, sighed deeply. His clenched fist trembled, but he made an effort to speak calmly. I've raised Hannah as my own. My feelings for her haven't changed. If it could cure her, I'd do anything. Sarah, visibly shaken by Kyle's confrontation, started crying loudly, apologizing and explaining her actions. David's parents also apologized deeply for their son's and Sarah's actions. As tensions rose, Kyle announced firmly, "I'll divorce Sarah." Sarah protested, "Wait, how will I support Hannah's treatment?" At that moment, David arrived unexpectedly. His face, initially flushed with anger, turned pale as he realized the extent of his wrongdoing. He seemed lost as he asked for Amy. Unable to contain my anger, I stood up and slapped David across the cheek. "Hannah is innocent. I will never forgive you for trying to harm Amy." David, taken aback by my outburst, looked bewildered. The room fell silent with tension. Sarah, clinging to Kyle and crying, was rejected by him. "David, I'm divorcing Sarah," Kyle stated firmly. "If you want to marry her, go ahead, but I won't give you Hannah." Through legal proceedings, Kyle successfully gained custody of Hannah, while Sarah faced difficulties and was eventually hospitalized due to a breakdown. Despite her infidelity, it was evident that she deeply cared for Hannah. Kyle took a leave from work to care for Hannah primarily, while I also divorced David. Amy and I found peace living with my parents. Amy thrived at daycare, making new friends. Despite the turmoil, Kyle and I remained in contact. He updated me that Hannah was scheduled for a heart transplant soon. During a visit to Hannah, she smiled warmly at Amy, saying, "Let's play a lot together after my surgery." Both Kyle and I, despite our challenges, committed to raising our children responsibly as single parents, supporting each other along the way.